We're going to call the meeting to order. Our first agenda item, public input for work session. We do not have public input, as Todd said. Thank you. We will move right on to the developmental bilingual education model. And that's Dr. Z, correct?
So today we do have two pieces of information for the board, and we'll go through, and our goal will be to be done at about 3:45, so you have time to do your committee reports and talk through those, and then have time to be prepared for the next meeting that you have. So the first one, Dr. Zeke will be able to go through and provide information. He'll have some support as well as we go through this, and talking about the programming that we have at Hayward Elementary, and to be able to show the science behind the changes that we will make there, and be able to provide you that information. So, Dr. Zeke.
Good afternoon, board. I have approval, and today, Dr. Zeke will talk about the but first, a little overview of section. I'll start down 6, gender research of the district, what kind of models might be out there, or what kind of language you might help students learn that language in your district. 2008, get into the one thing model. I wrote parts.
Will do. We moved into another building, Robert Frost, a few years later, added some more grade levels, and continued that on until we built Sonia Sotomayor. And then right before COVID, we investigated another type of program, the two-way immersion program, where 50% of our students speak Spanish as a native language and 50% speak English as a native language. And then half of their day is taught in English and half of their day is taught in Spanish. And we began that the fall of 2019. Fast forward a few months later, and March 2020 happens in that very first year. So that group got to take a little break in the fourth quarter due to COVID. But we came back strong with masks on the next year, and those kids in the two-way immersion program have now entered middle school, and they are 6th graders at George McGovern and at Ben Rifle Middle School. And our two-way immersion models are at Rosa Parks and Hayward. And now we're going to talk to you a little bit about Hayward and why we might be making a change from the two-way immersion model into the developmental bilingual education model. And for that, I will pass it over to Liz.
All right, so we'll back up a little bit and continue on with the current state of what our immersion program is. As we look at where we are, what we need to do to meet the growing needs of our district, as well as the diverse population of our students, we want to have the best academic achievement outcomes for them as possible. We look at adding our developmental bilingual education DBE model. When we think about where we are, though, currently, we have about 2,000 students in the district who currently participate in Spanish immersion. Those 2,000 students are participating across 7 buildings throughout the district. We have 2 current programming models. The first one is the one-way immersion program, which, as Dr. Zeke explained, takes place at Sonia Sotomayor. And then we have our two-way immersion program that takes place at Rosa Parks and takes place at Hayward Elementary. As those students funnel up into middle school, the shift for the instruction really starts to focus on the content and the language aspect of it, and that's where they have the 50-50 language model at the middle school level for those students. As they enter high school, the focus is really on that credit course completion and completing those courses in the target language of Spanish. And as students complete those courses at the high school level, they have options to acquire graduate level courses, and they also have the option to acquire the South Dakota State Seal by Literacy through that program. I should also mention that entering into this Spanish immersion program within the district, that happens in kindergarten. That's that pathway for students to enter. But there also is an additional option for our heritage speakers. So as students enter the Sioux Falls School District and they have that native language, we want to provide them with the best option as well for their education. And so they have options to enter the programming through that heritage speaker piece. So that's the current state of the district, which then as we think about, okay, how do we meet the growing needs, diversity of our students, that's where we bring in the Hayward piece. Okay.
I'll go with I do think it's worth saying, like, as we're asking for a change, that, like, we have a world-class program. We really do, and, like, in Sioux Falls Public, this dual language model is fantastic. And when I mean dual language, I mean both one-way, two-way, Spanish immersion for short, encompassing all of them. We send our teachers to national conferences. And they're like, oh my gosh, we're gonna have to, like, we're gonna learn how to fix this thing. And they go there and they're like, wait, you guys do what? And what we're finding is, like, our teachers or principals who are at conferences are suddenly sworn and, like, looking for, from other districts that are just beginning to implement or aren't as far down the road as us, like, looking for answers from us. So we have a really good program, and this is a positive step for us. So just real quick, the why for dual language education. This chart real quick just shows, really it makes the case for dual language education for EL students. So if you look at each one of those bars, it's a different model of support for EL students. And this is showing EL students' achievement in English language arts assessments. It's from Iowa, California, Terra Nova testing. And it's longitudinal over time, so it's the same cohort of kids in first grade and 11th grade, right? All the way through. And up at the top there, I just want to point out to you, it's a norm curve equivalent, and the dashed line would be like the mean score for that grade level, right? And so then you look at, well, how do EL kids in a two-way dual immersion program do? So that would be like our two-way, most successful. And it's comparing the different models across. One-way dual there is a little bit tricky. That is not like the one-way program that we have here at SOC. That is a one-way model for native Spanish speakers, for EL students. So it's showing how kids in that type of program would achieve. You can see it's the second one, and then just down on the bottom, least effective, pull out ESL classes. The one thing I think is worth highlighting on here too is that one of the problems is everything works at first. Like, you see that first to third grade jump, everything works no matter what you do. And what the power in this is really what works for kids over time, what gives them the best outcomes over time. So that's kind of like the case for dual language programs for EL kids. This is from What Works Clearinghouse, and it's just kind of the case for English kids. How well does this work for them? Tier 1, strong support. I mean, that's just kind of a shortcut, meaning that there's well-designed studies that support this type of model for it. And this is specifically about English reading achievement for kids who speak English in the program. So now the change. Okay. Just wanted to tee it up there a little bit. The proposed shift, and you really kind of have like some of the bullet points on that handout in front of you, but this is organically coming from Hayward. It's not something that like Spanish immersion is pushing towards Hayward. Like, Hayward has this thing that's working really well, and they've been out exploring, like, how can we make this better? So we started talking. They actually brought it up at a NABE conference, at the National Association of Bilingual Ed conference that they went to last year. They connected with Dr. Ngambi, who, like, huge background in this. She's been a NABE or a MABE president for a few years, MIT, Harvard stuff, and she said, like, what it sounds like you guys really need is something like this DVD program for your kids. On the handout, effectively what's changing is Hayward would shift from a two-way model to a developmental bilingual model. And the reason for that is just access for kids. The reality is right now is Hayward's struggling to fill the English side of a two-way model. And so they're in this space where they're saying, oh, you want to come in and join our two-way model? Well, hold on, because we got to hold on to these English kids. And then they're not coming. And so it's just an access point is really what the shift is. There'd be instructional shifts with it. And those are kind of walked through exactly how those will look, but really it's been opening the door.
Questions on things that you would have. So really looking at this process that we're moving to it at Hayward, when you had the 50-50 model that we have at Rosa Parks and was at Hayward, it works very well when you have an equal number of native Spanish speakers and native English speakers. It does not when you throw that out of balance. And we've seen through the research that as you go into these models, what's one of the next most effective models is the developmental bilingual education, the DBE model that we would use now at Hayward because of that change in the numbers, the balance. And so we're really looking at the individual schools and what the needs of our community are. And so when Ms. Herbold talked about the 50-50 model, that's 50% of the native English speakers, 50% of native Spanish speakers. And that's out of balance at Hayward, not in a bad way, it just is. And so it's hard to run that model, and it's hard to hold some of those kids until we get enough of the equal balance. And so this would bring that more into a DBE model that we'd utilize at Hayward. So we'd really truly have 3 models working throughout the district. And each one of them meets a specific need of our student demographics. And each one of them have been found, and I agree with Dr. McKay when he said, this is truly a highlight nationally for the Sioux Falls School District, and the admiration many other districts have of this program. And obviously our community itself is very fond of this program. And so this just extends it in another way to be able to meet the needs of what we have currently with our ratios at Hayward. So questions that you would have. The implementation date for this would start in kindergarten, and it would start in next fall. Yeah, so we'll start with the kindergarten group. We would obviously honor the model we've been utilizing with those students that are already in the current kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th. They'll still continue it up into the model that we would have at George McGovern. This would just start that change at the kindergarten level, and it would meet the needs of our students there at the school. So questions that you may have.
So what's that?
I'll let you, do I answer or you?
Yeah, I'm looking, I think I have a bullet on there. Yeah, in short, yes. Not only that, but even go as far to say that English dominant kids at Hayward would be welcome to continue to join. It's just that this is not specifically designed for you. We know that they can be successful. We'll have the supports in there for them to be successful. It's just more of this pivot reflects what's at Hayward for students.
And those students that, you know, right now when you say if there's 26 kids in the class, we were looking more that it's a 6 to 20 ratio rather than you know, closer to a 13-13. And so it really holds our native Spanish speakers because they can't continue to join the program because they'd have to wait till additional native English speakers would join the program. And so it really helps to change the model to what the needs are and the demographics of that specific school. And the research on it is showing that the students there begin to learn at a much faster rate than they would if it's a pull-out program, an independent program that we've utilized sometimes in the past, and this far exceeds that. So that's one of the greatest benefits of it.
Are we only doing this at Hayward because it's the only one that needs it, or are we just trying it at Hayward first and then it could expand?
So right now, Rosa, super balanced, wouldn't need this. And like, that's kind of the interesting part as you look at like Sonia's one-way model the two-way models that we have, and then really this DBE model is another version of one-way model, and that was on the bar graph. So like that's this one. The interesting piece about all three of those is that what type of model you have is dependent on student demographics, right? Like if you're going to run a 50-50, but you don't have equal balances, you can't run a 50-50. If you're going to run a one-way foreign language like at Sonia, you need all the kids to be English dominant in order for that to function, right? And if you're going to run a one-way DBE model like we're proposing at Hayward, you need a vast majority of the kids to be dominant in Spanish. So it's really just with these models, they have to reflect the demographics of the kids that you have in front of you.
You go back to your line graph that you had. And truly, when you see there, the two-way model that's at the top, that would be representative of what we currently have at Rosa Parks. And that would have some of the greatest outcomes, but obviously the demographics there would support that. The demographics at Sonia Sotomayor would not support that. So you really fit which one of these models is the best fit for the demographics of the school that the program's at. Could it expand as we start to see the results of the programming at Hayward? Yeah, absolutely could. You know, that's something we could look at as we go throughout the district and analyze the results of the program at Hayward. So it could.
The demographics that we have at Hayward is they're approaching 50% native Hispanic speaking students. So we know that will continue because it's a heavily populated Spanish speaking neighborhood.
It'll also help us to support because we had been adding additional students who were native Spanish speakers when they get to the middle school level. This will actually provide a better format for that when they move into the middle school program at George McGovern Middle School.
Can you give a little sense of what a day looks like under that model of a third grader, for example?
Absolutely. Third grader will look almost exactly like two-way does right now, because really the change comes in kindergarten and first grade for these kids. So beyond second grade and up will look exactly like our two-way model with English side teacher, Spanish side teacher, kids flip-flop throughout the day, just like what we have happening right now in two-way. I'm going to guess you want to hear about kindergarten first.
Yeah, then we want to hear about kindergarten first.
So the big change in kindergarten and first grade is really getting kids literate in Spanish first and really leveraging Spanish in order to acquire English. So like seeing that mother tongue is the ceiling for the second language. And so like the more we can leverage that and build that up, we can bring in English at a faster rate later on. So what it looks like is 2 Spanish homeroom teachers. Kids get to stay in one room all day, which will be very nice in kindergarten and first grade, not having to navigate that flip-flop. And then the change is they would get basically a specials course, and it's English literacy. So it'd be a balance of code-based instruction, language-based instruction every single day. So they're getting math, science, social studies in Spanish, in a language they understand. They're learning to read in Spanish. And then we're starting that initial literacy piece in English right off the bat in kindergarten. That's also a piece that makes it distinct from Sonia's one-way model, in that Sonia's one-way initial literacy instruction is 100% Spanish. We don't start English instruction until third grade. So this is really, the DBE model is, we call it both languages for everybody, as our initial literacy instruction. We're doing both languages for everybody from the get-go.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important for people to understand, is that the kids that are going into our Spanish immersion are already speaking English. And so when they go into that, they're really learning how to read and write in Spanish. So this is just kind of a flip-flop in a certain regard to those heritage speakers. Because, yeah, I mean, right, and research shows as you documented here, that they will learn and know that English faster when you know how to read and write it in their native language, which, you know, go.
It's showing that we'll need 2 Spanish homeroom, a DVE English language, 1 Spanish, 1 English, a DVE English language support staff. Do we have those staff people already in place? Are we going to need to grow that program? What's the total of teachers and supports needed for that?
We can do it with our current staff at Hayward. So we have, Hayward has been very strategic, and as they've built out their two-way program, and many of those two-way teachers are bilingual and capable of instructing in either language. So it'll just be kind of a shift.
And then follow, would the budget stay the same? Would it look similar, just kind of ease into next year, or is there going to be significant change?
Yep. No, really still the same, because as comes up, the program moves up through from kindergarten to first to second. It basically will replace the program that we currently have there. So it'll stay cost-wise. You would not see the difference in that. And you're absolutely right. What you brought up, President Kelly, is that it does helps him to solidify their literacy in their native language as they then begin to learn English. And that's kind of the exact same process we use at Sonia Sotomayor, except they come in with a much more of a solid background in their native language of English. So, and it's shown to be very effective that way as far as the research.
So the point with that is that a native English speaker could be part of this program, because essentially they will be starting in much the same way as you would at Sonia Sotomayor, correct? So everybody understands.
Yep,
okay.
You are correct.
Any other?
They could start into that program. We just see a fewer number of individuals that would be eligible to be able to do that with that same background, but they absolutely could.
Well, I think, first of all, I appreciate the use of data and research and the relevancy of that to apply to our particular demographics. And then third, if we're starting with the goal in mind, and that being the best academic achievement for all students as being our goal, if we apply all of that onto this idea, it really does give us something to think about. And because we're just hearing it fresh today, the purpose of the work session is just to process and appreciate all the work.
And they had, for several months now, been bringing forward the information on this, and we obviously wanted to make sure the board was aware of it before we implement that for, not quite a year from now. But just the effectiveness, the research that goes in behind it, and the process that we have here in the Sioux Falls School District with our immersion programs. Any further questions? Okay. The second report we have here, thank you. The second report we have here will be with Mr. Conrad, and Mr. Conrad will go through and just update again to talk through the process of our capital improvement plan, the CIP update, and just be able to step through the timeline of that and what we'll see over the next few months. So Mr. Conrad will lead us through that.
All right, thank you. Purpose is a broad overview of the plan, talking about capital improvement plan for the next 5 years, I would say, and what it looks like. So you're going to see a timeline after kind of show a preliminary timeline, go through a little bit of the process. We compiled the capital improvement plan project list, and then circle back to what the closing timeline is. So you're going to kind of see a split timeline, but put up a few dates on the front side, and then fill in the background knowledge, close it out is the format. So when we look at this, December 2025, about a month away, the goal is that we have a comprehensive project list that's been created, and we're able to share that out and get it completed in that December timeframe. And Jeff Kreider and his group is working the streets, talking to the building principals, and compiling that list of information. Then in January 26, we want to establish a CIP steering committee with the goal that they're going to meet in February through June and have conversations about, let's look at this project list and how do we prioritize that project list and put it together. The goal is that that steering committee would come to the board, the school board, in August of 2026 with some recommendations. Once we receive that recommendations, we're going to work the fall of 2026 with some listening sessions with the public and just try to create avenues for feedback, information to make sure we get the list right. We have the right projects that we're moving forward. So that's, I would say, maybe the first phase that takes us 1 year out. So maybe the question becomes, all right, a little quick on the trigger. There we go. So the factors that are considered as we go through this, we're looking at a 10-year window. What does it look like 10 years down the road? So we're looking forward into the future. What are some efficiency projects that we can do? Maybe it's the converting to our LED lighting across the district. That helps adds efficiencies for energies where now we can take those savings and apply them elsewhere. And then also looking at equipment and technology projects that just are large in nature, more than a capital outlay piece on an annual basis. So that process, district leadership is working with building administrators where we walk through the building. Jeff Kreider's crew comes around, walks through every building every year, takes that facility inventory, what needs to be replaced, what needs to be updated. Are there some new needs that we've gotten into a building and said, boy, this is kind of how we're functioning, but if we could function this way and we would be more efficient in the work we do. So that analysis goes through. They're also going to review in 2018 with that bond issue, look back and say, what were some projects that were identified in 2018? Does that need still exist today? Because we didn't have they had to draw a line somewhere, so those projects weren't funded in the last one. Maybe it's something we bring forward and should be funded this time, so that list is also considered. And then just those evaluations of each building. And from that information, a project list is created. So in December 2025 into January, district leadership reviewing those plans, and the goal is to create a comprehensive project list that could be presented to the steering committee, give them something to work with. So the goal is to narrow it down, have costs associated with it, have some plans associated with it so that that steering committee can review those pieces. And the goal is to have that already and presented so when the steering committee starts in February 26 with their meetings, they're ready to go with information as they drive through it. The task of the steering committee as they meet is to review those pieces as a community representatives from the city of Sioux Falls, the Sioux Falls School District, and identify what projects would be supported and worthy to put forward in a future bond issue. And that's the goal. That's the recommendations that's going to come to you guys in August of 2026. Is their compilation of what should we bring forward to that bond vote. Refreshing back to the timeline. So that takes us to fall of 2026. And what are the next steps? The closing steps would be as we hear public feedback through this next year, the goal would be in February 2027, we're in a position for the school board to make a voting, put it to vote, make a recommendation as to when that bond should be voted on by the public. And a big piece of that bond issue is going to be the construction of a brand new Whittier Middle School to replace the current facility. And other items that may come through that comprehensive capital improvement project list. We review that. A vote takes place sometime in spring 2027 on the bond issue. With its passage, architectural plans developed for a new Whittier Middle School happening that summer, fall of 2027. The goal would be to start a construction on Whittier Middle School in spring of 2028 with a Whittier Middle School opening in the fall of 2030. So that's the big capital improvement plan timeline cycle that's out there for the next year and a half as it gets put in front of the community for a vote. So I would open it up now to questions that you have. I know, not to put Jeff Kreider on the spot too, but being a part of this whole capital planning process, but I open it up to questions that the board may have.
A couple of things that I guess I'd like to highlight is number one, that we will have a steering committee put together, that we will have some board input in that, with the goal being that we get a broad range of task force members that are bringing skill sets and experience from lots of different areas to the community because ultimately the board is given authority to work on the scope of work to this body of people, and then to bring back to us a recommendation. So not only will we have an impact and some say into the task force members and how we build that out in addition with our leadership team, but also the scope of work that we are really given authority to that group of people to work on. So I just, for the board members and the executive leadership to know how, and for the community to hear how we work together to make these, we really have some, it's really an honor to work on challenges that we have as a district and to allow the community to be part of the problem solving. And when I say problems, they're problems that we want to be having because it's growth, it's children that we get to impact day in and day out in their learning. So these are things we want to tackle, but that the community knows we're tackling it with their input. Gail? Here.
Knowing how badly we really need to replace Whittier, I look at the timeline with the CIP bond vote in the spring of 27, the plans being developed summer and fall of 27, construction not until spring of 28. You know what I'm going to ask, Jeff. Seems like by the time we have the vote, don't we have some rudimentary plans already sketched out? So why does it take us so long to get shovels in the ground?
Well, we really don't have a concept that it fits on the site that we've chosen. There's a lot of work to be done in that time frame. I mean, sometimes it takes almost a year to get everything done, but you got to also time it to the spring construction when frost comes out of the ground and get those pieces in place. So you don't want to shortchange the design process, but that design process should start almost as immediately when the bond is passed. So there's a lot of work to do. I mean, that's a fairly condensed time frame, but you can't start you won't start the construction in December. You have to wait till spring to frost, and it'll be a much better process, and try to get as much building up and running from spring to the following winter and work through the winter. So it's a good time frame, but it's very similar to what Jefferson High School was in that time frame. So it works. And this will not be a plan, a prototype plan reuse. It's going to be designed for that site. So there'll be a lot of input on the design committee that gets put together of I mean, some of the big decisions will be, do we want to make it like a Whittier? Do we want to make it modern? Do we want to bring it into the neighborhood? So those discussions will take place, and there's no predetermined thought right at this point in time.
And Dr. Knoll, this might be a question for you, but can we talk a little bit more about how the steering committee is chosen, both for the plan, the CIP plan, but also for, you mentioned the Whittier Design Committee, if individuals are interested and want to be considered for those committees, how do they put their name in the hat?
Yeah, great question. And that is part of the process that we want to make sure we include our community. And you saw the bond that was passed in 2018. The committee that was established there was of our community. And there was an individual that came in and a team that came in and led that process. So it wasn't the school district leading that. It was truly a community and saying, here's where we believe it should go. Part of that committee was established through school board recommendations, administrative recommendations, just depending on, because we want to make sure we have a representation from the city there. So we have city planning, individuals that are impacted by the changes that could take place. And this will go across the cornerstone of this would be Whittier. but this will impact multiple other schools as well as we go through the list of things that could be done as capital outlay, and other schools would be impacted by that. So we want to make sure we have some representation from those areas as well. But that'll be a compilation of recommendations for the board, administration, and then last time, and I believe that's going to be an appropriate model this time, individuals from our community can apply to be on the committee. And we obviously will look at that, and last time we went through the list of individuals that applied and made sure we had a good representation across. So sometimes there could be a larger number that would apply, in this case, from the Whittier area. Well, it's important to have a good representation there, but we also need it across the whole district. And just because they're not selected for the committee, their voice still matters. That's why we go out and have the listening session. And the listening sessions changed quite a few things last time. As you remember, we had the board back together last time, and they changed quite a few things after the listening sessions were completed. So we'll go through and have that group put together. We will start to plan out. We wanted to make sure you have the rough overdraft again, and just to kind of see what that looks like. And then we'll begin to put together some of the very specific details of that. You know, how we're going to go through the process of the selection of the committee, and obviously people's input on that. How do we go through the process of, once this is all looked at and we start to see what's going to be on that, how do we put groups together to start to see what those projects look like? And we did that very effectively with Jefferson and with Ben Rifle. Now, Ben Rifle was a little bit of a model that we'd already used before, but Jefferson was not. And we brought a team together to make sure that we went through that process. The architecture that's selected, they will help on that, and the firm that's selected to do that, they would help in that process. But the first thing we obviously need to do is get that committee to say, what is it going to look at, the scope, and then what do we choose to bring forward to the vote? And then we'll put committees to look at specifics again after that. So it'll be a heavy input from our community.
Okay, I know why we need a new middle school in the Whittier location. We've had this conversation amongst us several times. Say, for instance, this is the first time somebody's listening to our work session. Can somebody share the importance of that area getting a new school, the need of it, and maybe why we should be doing this bond vote and its significance for our community?
Yeah. Well, that's part of the question that we're putting back to the task force to answer. And that's part of the significance of building this committee. We keep calling it a steering committee or task force. I'm using those terms interchangeably, but those are some of the answers that they're going to be able to give back out to the community. But some of that work came off the heels of the 2018 planning, and particularly with Whittier, Jeff Kreider could speak specifically on why that particular building was selected, and that the location was relatively kept in that area. Is that the information that you're looking for?
Yeah, just like, you know, we know that it's not ADA accessible. We know it's one of the oldest buildings in our district, but some people don't know that. They don't understand why there's a need.
Right. So that will be part, and then in addition to that, there'll be a list of other items that are needed in the district, but that scope of work will be given to the task force, and it will be up to them to kind of put that in some kind of an order so we know how best the community wants us using their dollars. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the last task force was very clear that we needed to keep that on the radar. It might not be needed because we had so many growth issues and the bond size and whatnot that they wanted us to have the time to purchase properties and get ready for the next bond. And they said, don't lose that in the translation. It was very important to them. You know, that building is the oldest building we have in the district. It's 18 levels, and sometimes you have to go up to go down. And so there's a lot of pieces that, you know, curtail. And we're trying to keep it up so those folks don't have a, you know, a bad experience. I mean, we're keeping the aesthetics portion, but we're not doing renovations or those sort of things that we might have chosen to do if we were going to stay there long term. So I think that last, what I can say is that last steering committee said that's really important, and that neighborhood deserves that as well.
And they had explored the cost of renovations, and that far exceeded building a new
Yeah.
building and purchasing. And so all that was dug into.
One other thing I'd add to help to answer your question there. There's so many things that would need to be renovated and done and additions made to it. So you put additional dollars, millions of dollars into that old of a building and you still have that same structure. With the new building there, the opportunities that we could give kids in that neighborhood and the programs that we could bring to it. And obviously we'd have a group look at other middle schools that have been built within our community, but outside of our community to see what could be put into that would give a distinct advantage to kids that attend school there. And we've also talked at times about the possibility with a new building to add on some type of a after-school program facility. We did that with the Boys and Girls Club at George McGovern. And that could be a great asset to Whittier as well to be able to provide that service there. So the opportunities that could come about with that as we look through and go through the process and the amount of money that it would take to renovate compared to build new and the opportunities, it makes a lot of sense to do that. We want to hear from the community to see what they think and see on the budgetary constraints of that, but we definitely heard that in 2018. Other questions? Well, those are the two reports, and obviously the last one here is just to give you and remind you of the timeline. We'll start to work out details and make sure you get that information. You'll hear about the capital improvement planning process continuously as we go through work sessions, so you make sure you have updated information, and especially as we begin to form the committee to make sure that we have the input from you as well on that. And we will get that information out to our community, so if they wish to apply to be part of that committee, that they would have an opportunity to do that. We just always caution that the number that apply, there'll probably be more than we can have on a committee. We want to make sure we have good representation across, but we'd encourage people still to apply so we can make sure we have a good representation across our district. So those are the two reports we have, and we would allow it to go back to the board now for your committee updates.
Deal? However you want to start around the.
So Elizabeth and I both serve on the K-12 Policy Committee, and we met yesterday morning in conjunction with Superintendent's Cabinet at the beginning. Most of the policies that when we went through didn't require any changes, and so as you go through, you'll see review, no changes. Some of them, however, sparked some discussion, which was probably the more interesting part of the meeting, because the policies themselves were pretty cut and dry. So the first one with AC, with equal opportunity and non-discrimination, you know, some of the legal terminology, the fact that we use the term gender and not sex in our policy, and so far the courts are still saying that that's an okay term to use. We also talked a little bit about, you know, civil rights laws, and if they change, how that would impact this policy. And our legal counsel reminded us that it's really the interpretation of the current administration. So we're sitting on that. We looked at the grievance process, and of course there's all kinds of paperwork that goes along with that. And just the fact that our legal counsel is responsible and should have all of the reports for any discrimination or harassment. You can see the next ones are no changes. And then we did have a change to DBJ. Elizabeth, you want to talk about that one?
Just the amount of budget transfers from one account to another went from 10,000 to 50,000 to match the expenditure amount. So if anyone wants to know more about that, I'm sure Todd would entertain any questions. Going from there, we had no changes to taxing and borrowing. And and then just a minor change of phrase really from state statutes to law in another section. So the next point of conversation was around general education for homebound services. And this was a policy I wasn't familiar with and hadn't thought a lot about just in terms of how we provide services to homebound students. This is when there's a temporary condition, like a child is recovering from a car accident or a temporary illness or something like that, where they wouldn't be able to attend school. Any disabilities or things that are longer lasting would be covered by a different policy. This covers, we don't have any students receiving these homebound services right now, but throughout the year, there's typically about 6 to 10 students that receive these services. And it's really a case-by-case determination. So the additional language was just to provide a little more flexibility where you can provide that instruction in the home, the hospital, or another location deemed appropriate by the district. So that's just allowing for those case-by-case situations. We also had a couple policies that have to do with loaning textbooks, so to speak, to non-public schools. So this is something I thought was pretty interesting just in terms of public schools are required to provide some we're saying textbooks, but what's a textbook anymore? So far, we have not provided any Chromebooks or technology from that aspect, the actual equipment. But there might be software or a different way to access a textbook, so to speak, that has been provided to private schools or homeschooled individuals. So thought that was interesting, and I think it would be good to know at some point, the cost that the public schools incur for that type of thing. Any questions?
No, I do have one more comment back on the homebound services for general ed. The new language was partly in the green font there, was partly because of a discussion on medically diagnosed emotional health issues. And some of the community providers that we need to look to provide some of those services for kids. So we needed to make sure that we had, or another location if deemed appropriate, to help those kids that have that emotional or mental health diagnosis. And just if you know of any policies that should come before the committee, please let us know and we'll let Brett know.
Okay, thank you for that thorough report. Mark? You're done. Yeah.
I am on the PATH committee, so that's a group of city and local officials that come together and just focus on the safety of crosswalks and different things around the school area. Todd and I were at a meeting, 2 months ago, where it got brought up about the Marcella LeBeau path getting made so students from the community area, there's like that little marsh in between a community and Marcella LeBeau, and we're hoping to get a path for them to walk across more easily. That kind of got brushed over, so I did send another follow-up email to make sure we get that path started and the city working on it. So I'm hoping that I'll have more of a report of there being movement on that. I learned that non-emergency school crossing call number is 605-978-6699, and that's just for, hey, I'm seeing a guy speed at Garfield every single day. You know, you don't have to call 911 for those instances. You can call a specific number that the city has set up to look into those things, to survey the area, get an officer out there. And I thought that was a really great opportunity for people to know that number and be aware of it. 605-798-6699.
6699. So I didn't know that. I figured that'd be worth sharing. Accessible housing has been closed. That's supposed to be a monthly meeting, but because of the government shutdown, we were not able to convene this last month, and I don't know if we'll convene next week. So, God bless. One day at a time. I have a quick update on the Education Foundation. We reached the $1 million mark for the endowment. So thanks to donors, a portion of donations, unless they are earmarked differently, go towards the endowment, which will be for good forever, and a certain percentage of the funds off the endowment go back into the grant making that the Education Foundation does. So there's many other good things going on, but I just wanted to highlight one significant milestone. Okay, well, we are at the, Dr. Mold, are we good? All right, do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Our meeting is adjourned.